Ubisoft currently has several projects in the works under the Assassin's Creed title, but none of them are as interesting as Assassin's Creed Invictus, which promises to be a multiplayer standalone for the entire franchise. And in this video, we're not only just going to be covering everything that we know so far, but we're also going to be exploring how gameplay will actually work. Before we do get into the video, if you enjoy the content here, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Every single week we're uploading the latest videos around all Ubisoft titles, which does include Assassin's Creed. So if you do want to stay up to date on everything, then make sure you are following the channel. When you think about the Assassin's Creed franchise, multiplayer is the last thing that you think about. It's only played a small part in very selected Assassin's Creed games, and has not been something that Ubisoft have explored in recent times, especially with the size in which Assassin's Creeds have been recently, with Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla. But there is a project that Ubisoft are currently working on, which is supposed to be a standalone multiplayer for the entire Assassin's Creed franchise, and right now it's called Assassin's Creed Codename Invictus. Now, Ubisoft are working on several titles for the Assassin's Creed franchise, all of them scheduled to release over the next 5 years. And if you was hoping Invictus was going to be something that gets released sooner rather than later, you would be wrong. Right now, we have more information about Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is scheduled to release in 2023. We then have a little bit of information about Assassin's Creed Red. This is supposed to be releasing after Mirage and will be set within Japan. And then we have Assassin's Creed Hex, which we don't really know anything about, other than there's a 30-second trailer and is promised to be a lot darker, as well as something completely different to what Assassin's Creed fans are used to. And we believe this is supposed to be following Assassin's Creed Red. And then that leaves us with Assassin's Creed Invictus, probably the title which is going to be released after all of these titles are pushed public. So we're talking at least 3 to 4 years. But with all of that in mind, it hasn't stopped players talking about it. So much so that whenever Ubisoft has held an interview, there's always been someone that needs to ask about an Assassin's Creed multiplayer. And because of that, even though Invictus is probably releasing after Assassin's Creed Hex, we know more about Invictus than what we do about Hex. So Invictus will be part of Assassin's Creed Infinity. For those that don't know, Infinity is not actually going to be a game, but instead an Assassin's Creed hub, where you'll have access to some of the games that we've just mentioned. Not Assassin's Creed Mirage, but will follow after with Assassin's Creed Red, Assassin's Creed Hex, and of course, Invictus. Now, because this is part of Infinity, Ubisoft are not quite sure whether or not this is going to be free or whether or not you will need to pay to access Invictus. Now, I'm sure the reason that they're saying this right now is because they're waiting to see how well or how badly Infinity performs as a hub. I'm sure if Infinity gets loads of players accessing it because they enjoy the Assassin's Creed franchise, and hopefully Assassin's Creed Red as well as Hex has been successful, there's a much higher chance that Invictus will be free to play. And I'm sure because Ubisoft of course are trying to get as much money as possible, there will be microtransactions as well as other ways in which they can monetize Infinity itself. So they can push a free-to-play standalone version of multiplayer for the whole Assassin's Creed franchise, and there'll be a conversion for those that play that game to eventually pay money on Infinity. Whereas if it does extremely poor, I'm sure Invictus will have a set price attached to it. With Invictus, it's not just going to be a standalone game set within a very specific time period with a very specific assassin. They're hoping it will link to all the previous Assassin's Creed titles and settings, as well as, depending how long this goes on for, they're hoping to bring in future Assassin's Creed titles. Really comes down to the longevity of this game. Now, something very interesting to talk about is that multiplayer is not a new thing. It's actually been part of Assassin's Creed several times before, and it's played out in 2 different ways. The first way is what we experienced with Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, when multiplayer was first ever introduced. The multiplayer is broken down into several game modes, mainly around hunting and killing an assigned target, whilst evading pursuers at the exact same time. And unfortunately back then, especially with Brotherhood, I can't quite remember with the following titles, but with Brotherhood, you didn't play in as assassin. The story behind multiplayer was linking to Abstergo Industries, and in order to prepare new Templar agents to fight against assassins, they would use this Animus-based training program, and that was the whole premise behind multiplayer. So the characters that you got were pretty cool, but there wasn't too many assassins that you could play with, and there wasn't anyone as part of the main storyline. So you couldn't play as any of the main assassins. And this was the multiplayer that was part of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Assassin's Creed Revelations, Assassin's Creed 3, and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. The other title which had a multiplayer component, and probably the one which was the most successful, was Assassin's Creed Unity. Now this wasn't you playing against other players in a hunt and kill target scenario, and it didn't have a storyline which was linked to Abstergo Industries. Instead, you would play as assassins, and the idea is that you would team up with other players to complete various tasks. This was a co-op game mode. This would take certain tasks available to you within story, except to bring them over to an online world. You would be able to team up with 3 other players, so there's 4 of you in total, and you would be assigned to complete those tasks, whatever it is dependent on the overall mission. In some cases, you were there to perform a heist where you would need to steal various items. In other cases, you were there to assassinate various targets. The missions themselves were extremely straightforward, but with there being many other variables at play, with them being completing different tasks, as well as you being with different players of various skill levels, it led to there being occasions where it was slightly more difficult than what it really needed to be, but was certainly entertaining to go through. The only downside is Unity itself had many problems when it was first released, and the title as a whole received a lot of backlash as well as negative reviews on its initial launch. For a lot of those players, they didn't stick around, which led to there being further issues later when some of those issues were fixed, and there wasn't as many players before attempting to play online. Now there is one other multiplayer which Ubisoft did attempt and was inspired by Assassin's Creed, but was not going to be an Assassin's Creed title. This of course is Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones was originally going to be an Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag standalone. They were going to remove everything about assassins and just try to double down on pirates. On the initial reveal, players were extremely excited for this, but, and I'm sure you're aware, with every single time Skull and Bones was delayed, it got further away from that initial idea, but that idea stuck with many players, and I would like to see a multiplayer where it's just an open world. Probably similar to what you have with GTA, but mix in assassins. Then given the option for players to go into co-op missions and also set PvP game modes, with there being various free roam activities available for players to do. We should highlight that Ubisoft have tried this before, not with Assassin's Creed, but with Watch Dogs. Out of all 3 of these multiplayers that could potentially happen, I think the one that is most likely is just the co-op gameplay. The only argument that I've seen players make for it to be based on Brotherhood gameplay is because the development team behind Assassin's Creed Invictus is actually the team that was behind For Honor. And with that in mind, players are speculating that they're going to take Assassin's Creed Brotherhood gameplay and improve the combat system of For Honor to merge them all together, which would be pretty cool, don't get me wrong. But I will also say that just because there's one development team that had a particular type of style for one specific game doesn't mean that that's what they're going to push out to every other game. At the end of the day, despite what you think about Ubisoft, the developers there are talented, they're amazing. They are more than capable of programming different styles of multiplayers, and we've seen that with loads of the Ubisoft titles. Now, they haven't all been successful, but that's another story. They're all capable of programming any type of multiplayer. The reason that I say that I think it's most likely going to be the co-op is just because that's been the more successful one. And with Ubisoft trying to bring in every previous assassin as well as every future assassin into one standalone multiplayer, I think this is a way for them to go to actually bring teamwork with assassins rather than pit them all against each other. Invictus will still be a standalone game, so there isn't a problem pitting them against each other, but they are also trying to link it into Infinity, which is all one cohesive hub. Now, if you do want to learn more about Assassin's Creed Infinity, then we have done a fully in-depth video already here on this channel. I highly recommend if you're confused about it, because at the end of the day, it's not a game. I need to put emphasis on that because there is always a lot of confusion when talking about Assassin's Creed Infinity. Assassin's Creed Red, Assassin's Creed Hex, and Assassin's Creed Invictus will all be a part of Infinity. So if that does confuse you, I highly recommend clicking this video right now on screen. This video will take you through exactly what Infinity is and how it will link into every Assassin's Creed title within the future.